Hi, my name is Arnim WIEK. I'm a professor in the School of Sustainability at Arizona State University and the director of the Sustainable Food Economy Lab. I'd like to thank Stephen McGreevy and his team for putting together this international symposium on this very important topic. Today, I'd like to contribute to this with a talk on overcoming the problem bias, researching and learning sustainable food economy. As this is the opening keynote, I hope that this talk will provide some structure to the field of solution-oriented research on sustainable food systems and food economies, and with this also supports the conversations during the symposium over the coming days. Before getting started, I'd like to acknowledge my team, my research lab manager, my PhD students and research assistants, master students. Most of the material presented in the following is the result of years of collaboration within our team, as well as with our regional, national, and international collaborators. When it comes to contrasting problem-oriented and solution-oriented work on sustainable food issues, I'd like to use the idea of two different pathways. The dominant paradigm currently is that there is a lot of recognition of unsustainable food economy practices that exist out there. Research and education focuses on those, with the result that there is an increased understanding of the problems, at the same time also an increased level of frustration. The alternative, less dominant, but more and more interest and momentum gaining, is that there should be a recognition that sustainable food economy solutions out there exists. Research and education in return can then focus on those, and with this an increased understanding of those solutions, and with this also an increased level of hope and empowerment might follow. Unsustainable food systems prevail, and there is obviously a lot of recognition, and all of you know what these challenges are. I have just put together here a high-level list of challenges regarding economic, environmental, and social aspects. What we are seeing around the world is an increased effort in creating sustainable food economy solutions. This is on the level of the sustainable practices in food businesses, but it's also going deeper. It really penetrates the very core of businesses. The idea of B Corps or benefit corporations, worker and consumer cooperatives, and social enterprises are alternative sustainability-oriented business models that guide these newly emerging sustainable food enterprises. Short supply chains and alternative food networks or economies are then on the higher level, the connection between those different sustainability-oriented elements within a food economy or a food system. And finally, very important is to also recognize that there are more and more support services with exactly that same intention. Social finance, sustainable food business incubators, local food policies that all try to advance sustainable food economies. So it's really happening. I put a couple of different pictures and initiatives here on the slide. It's really happening around the globe and would provide a significant area of studies and education to. Now, that is happening outside of the university, but the idea could be to bring the solution orientation really into the university and focus on those good practices and pioneering businesses and sustainable food economy solutions that are out there. What we would do there is we would borrow from a research paradigm shift that has begun already decades ago in a variety of different fields. I want to mention here an early piece by Robinson and Serrar. Tom Robinson from Stanford University wrote back then with his colleague an article on preventing childhood obesity, a solution-oriented research paradigm. And it's a very interesting piece that really very clearly articulates that shift from a problem orientation to a solution orientation. This is one of my favorite pieces. Dan Sarowitz wrote in 2009 a very short one-page position paper called A Tale of Two Sciences, which was published in Nature. And we tried almost now a decade ago to use these other fields that have argued for and also demonstrated the shift from problem orientation to solution orientation and made a case for what this could look like in sustainability science, and also demonstrate this with a number of different projects. So what does this mean, a tale of two sciences, or these two different approaches? What are we dealing with? Robinson and Girard wrote, knowing a cause of a problem, while sometimes a helpful first step, does not directly translate into knowing how to intervene to solve that problem. It really needs a unique perspective to focus on solutions and solution endeavor in order to make progress. It's not enough to better understand the problems. You actually need to really direct research efforts towards the solutions. Sarowitz wrote, a different role for science, not to explain causal mechanisms of toxic chemicals, but to offer solutions by showing that a function served by a toxic chemical can be equally well served by a less toxic one. And we basically summarize that there are different modes of sustainability science, one that is primarily concerned with analyzing, kind of revealing the underlying mechanisms in coupled human environment systems and the problems therein. And that there is an emerging second path of sustainability research that really focuses on practical solutions. Research on sustainable food economy solutions can be structured in two areas. The first one is theoretical research, like in other fields as well, generalizing meta-studies. I'm not focusing on this one. I really want to move forward on understanding or structuring empirical research on sustainable food economy solutions. I'm proposing two differentiating axes. Research on solutions in this area can focus on existing solutions, it can focus on the transfer of solutions, or it can focus on new solutions or experiments. The second axis has also three categories. Research can focus on the micro, meso, or macro level, on the individual businesses or organizations, on subsystems or networks, or the overall economy. I want to deal more with this. I just want to mention here briefly that the settings for researching solutions are obviously very important. Transdisciplinary settings, cooperation with practitioners, as well as interdisciplinary settings, collaboration among various scholars, are key elements for successfully researching solutions. However, in this talk, I really want to focus on the structuration of solution research in the kind of core elements and not address and I will only address the settings in passing. As I mentioned before, I think it might be helpful to create a small typology of empirical sustainable food economy solutions research by focusing on these two axes, as I mentioned. And in this table, we have basically the layout for 9 different types, combining those two axes, 9 different types of solutions research. I want to briefly walk you through those different types and then illustrate them with studies from my lab. The first level is the understanding of existing solutions, the practices, the models. We are going here after the what, the how, and the why. Each line in the cells represents one or more studies we have conducted. So for instance, on the micro business, the understanding of existing solutions, we have studied sustainable food forests, sustainable craft breweries, sustainable bakeries, and so forth. On the meso level, we have looked into policy instruments, we have looked into agricultural land trusts, and so forth. Important is here, these are subsystems. So it's always about at least 2 entities collaborating or being in relation, or even more than that. And then on the macro level, really where it is about complex network, the complex network of an economy, we have studied, for instance, sustainable grain economy or the sustainable craft brewing economy in Arizona. The second line here, or the second type of research, is about supporting the adoption and transfer of existing solutions. Again, going through the three different levels there. On the level of the micro, the food businesses, on the micro level, we have been looking into a variety of different types of businesses or also individual businesses, and worked with them on supporting the adoption and transfer of existing solutions, whether this was on the role of the workforce or particular practices for small coffee businesses. On the level of the food subsystems, MESO, again, here it's about multiple players collaborating or being in relationship. So, for instance, we did a study together with the city of Tempe on the role of the city administration in advancing the local food economy. And finally, on the macro level, more studies that are then really addressing the adoption and transfer of existing solutions on the level of the economy. And finally, there's the area of supporting the creation of new solutions through experiments, and that can be done again on the micro, the meso, and the macro level. So that should, on the one hand side, give us a basic structure of how research could be differentiated. And at the same time, this is basically a layout for a lot of illustrative cases I want to walk you through. On the level of the understanding, I picked 3 studies that I want to briefly walk you through. And on the level of the transfer of solutions, I picked 2 and 1 for developing of new solutions. All of this obviously very selective. And let's start with a study we conducted on sustainable practices of small food businesses to overcome large relational and geographical distances. A key challenge in sustainable food supply is the large distances between the country of origin and the country of consumption. According to the typology presented above, this particular type of research would fall into this category of research that advances the understanding of sustainable solutions on the micro level. We first identified and then analyzed a number of small food businesses that have done pioneering efforts in this area. An example is Fair Afrique, a chocolate producer that not only uses organic practices, but is particularly strong on social and socio-economic issues, but really allowing the workers to participate in decision-making and also economically participate. Also, the final product is really all the way done in Ghana. So most of the value chain and the added value is being generated and remains in the country of origin, as opposed to a lot of other practices, even in the organic sector, where usually raw material is extracted and then the production and the really added value is being generated in industrialized nations. We studied a good share of those businesses and then came up with an evidence-supported typology where we wanted to basically classify all these different solutions to overcome relational and geographical distance. So what you see here is a simple typological approach to, on the one hand, differentiate between businesses and practices that address mostly to overcome or address the geographical distance or the relational distance. So that's, on the top, you see these 2 differentiations. And then the other one is that we saw approaches that primarily mitigate negative effects of large distances and other approaches that really overcome those large distances. And so you see here reducing greenhouse gas emissions or certifications or the reduction of food miles, the direct international trade or international community supported agriculture, All of these different types were supported by evidence from individual business studies that we undertook with primary data collection at the businesses and with the businesses. Another example on the micro level, where it is more about the how, not so much about the what these businesses do, was a study that we conducted on sustainable food forests. Sustainable food forests exist since several centuries. However, there has been over the last few decades a real revival across the world. More and more of these integrated food producing, processing systems is visible. This is a food forest we visited and did research on in the Netherlands. It's called Den Food Bosch, a food forest that was created a few years back, a really interesting design that takes advantage of the local ecosystems and has a variety of, as you can see here on the left-hand side, exactly like a forest structure, right? Food production on the various layers of a food system. The idea was here, however, to not so much look into what the food forest and the food foresters, the entrepreneurs are doing, but really trying to understand how it was designed. How did this solution actually come about? And we reconstructed the pathway from the very initialization in 2015 through the planning and the various implementation stages. We identified the core actors as well as a number of actions and activities, but also barriers and what kind of outputs were generated. Through several of such studies, not only Den Food Bosch, but several other food forests as well, we were able to extract success factors, so generic insights, evidence that supports the idea of what are reliable success factors when implementing sustainable food forests. And again, I don't want to go necessarily into the details. I just want to illustrate what such research on the how, on the actual evolution and implementation of food economy solutions could look like. A third study on this level of understanding existing food solutions was then on the macro level. We did quite an extensive study on the sustainable grain economy in Arizona, all the way from the farming through the various stages of processing. And we were particularly interested in understanding their evolution. So when reconstructing this evolution, we started in 2010, where there was really nothing of an economy-like construct regarding the grain production in Arizona. However, a few years later, we realized that there was an initial set of actors, really kind of pioneering, founding actors, that came together around artisan bread, around heritage grains, around organic practices, BKW Farm, a farm down in southern Arizona with a very strong focus on organic farming. And over the years, that's what we reconstructed, and there were a variety of connections, additional players, additional practices that came together, and now we have a really rich composition of a network that can be considered a fully built out alternative food network or sustainable grain economy. Obviously, this is just one facet of our study. We did sustainability assessments, pointed out strengths and weaknesses of that sustainable grain economy that is emerging here. We also quantified in terms of production volume and value chain aspects, quantified a variety of aspects. Again, can't go into the details here, just want to illustrate how on the level of the overall economy, macro level, understanding of existing solutions can be gained. I want to move on now to the second area of studies, where it is about researching in order to support the transfer, adoption and transfer of sustainable practices. This is a study we conducted together with a mill in northern Germany, the Bolzner Mühle. Sustainable milling and baking operations are really in the core of that business from the very beginning. It has been a transformational force even in the region, really invested in not only the downstream satisfying the customers, but really demanding from the regional farmers the switch to organic practices and a variety of crop switching and a variety of other really interesting practices. In our study with them, we were primarily interested in understanding the role of the workforce in advancing sustainability efforts in that company. And we did a study on a causal map that would support the Bolzner Mühle in advancing sustainability literacy, but also sustainability activities of their workforce. You see here in the center exactly those activities. We identified 10 activities where the workforce can really be actively pursuing sustainability, for instance, through creative and thoughtful innovation or through active and continuous learning, and so on and so on. But then we also said activities in itself are often not enough. It needs corresponding technologies and infrastructure in some cases, but really a lot of supporting drivers that make these activities possible. And so what we did is we looked into empirical cases for each of these activities. Tony's Chocolonis, for instance, that's the kind of famous chocolate company, was a case study for us for creative and thoughtful innovation through the workforce. So we studied in detail, we did primary data collection with them to understand better how did they enable creative and thoughtful innovation through the workforce. And we did this basically for all of those activities and all of those constellations, and then worked very closely with the Bolzner Mühle how to incorporate these insights. On the one hand side, the understanding of the existing solutions, but then really how can they adopt and transfer those practices into the Bolzner Mühle and advance sustainability actions from their workforce. The next example is from the area of sustainable coffee production. We did a study on TK Coffee, a sustainable coffee production and distribution company. Really interesting. It's an international community-supported agriculture, and they have been adopting a really large number of sustainable practices from the farming of the coffee all the way from the involvement and the equity issues, especially when it comes to coffee pickers and coffee farmers, then all the way through the roasting process and so forth. They have pioneered sailing their product with sail ships to create a carbon neutral transportation and distribution mechanism for their products, to all the way then really consumer education and how the consumers can really upfront share risk with the producers through upfront payments like in community supported agricultural schemes. Our task was to support the company in understanding what incentivizes sustainable coffee consumption. And the study layout was that we used 4 different types of marketing. 3 of them were experiential marketing, video that was given to consumers, presented to consumers, then a presentation from a team member of TK Coffee, a mindfulness tasting session of the TK Coffee, and as a control group, we used a traditional marketing tool, a leaflet with information on TK Coffee. The study was conducted with 136 consumers. They were fair visitors, and they were exposed to those different marketing instruments. And we then looked into in how far those, on the left-hand side, you see those experiential marketing interventions and the control group with a leaflet intervention. And we looked into in how far these interventions or these marketing tools have an effect on sustainable consumption. And we had a number of different proxies there for sustainable consumption behavior. The product evaluation, whether they like the take coffee, whether the consumer's attitude would change towards sustainable consumption, whether they would be open to become a member of the community-supported agriculture that take offers, or the willingness to pay a higher price, like it is necessary for the take coffee operations. And I don't want to go again into the details of the results, but we found really nuanced understanding of how these, especially the experiential marketing tools, advance sustainable consumption behavior in very nuanced ways. So another solution research in this particular case on the interlinkage between the sustainable food business and its consumers. And finally, I want to touch upon a project that we have pursued over several years. It's in the area of actually creating a new sustainable food business. This is a sustainable food forest business at Spaces of Opportunity in Central Phoenix. This is a food desert, a place where food is, especially healthy and fresh food, is not easily accessible. And on the Spaces of Opportunity incubation farm, a 19-acre space of farming, there is a sustainable food forest that is being created there since a couple of years. And our role in this process, again, from the research side, to provide all the necessary knowledge to make that happen. All the way from identifying the suitable site, identifying what is a vision, what do we want to actually work towards, what would this business look like, who would participate in it, in which role. We looked into what would be the revenue structure, what would be the corporate form of it. We then move forward and develop together, all in participatory settings, with a team on site, an action plan, how they can actually realize that vision through the financing and the business plan, conversion to a land trust, the physical implementation. We collaborated with the design team on the design of the food forest, identified the plants and trees and so forth. And again, always also with the quantitative and monetary calculations behind this. We designed the programming around children and adult education in collaboration with the nearby elementary school, and so forth and so forth. Again, a variety of research-oriented activities that support the development of a new sustainable food economy solution. I want to switch gears here. I don't have a lot of time left, but I want to switch gears very briefly to the learning side of solutions. So far, I've mostly spoken or exclusively spoken about the research side. Now I want to at least shed some light on learning solutions. And this is really dear to my heart because I see the power of learning solutions as opposed to learning problems on a daily basis with our various outreach training programs, but also and even more pronounced with our undergraduate and graduate students in the various programs at Arizona State University, but also in other programs I'm collaborating with around the world. A solution-oriented learning approach really is based on a variety of educational paradigms: experiential, action-oriented, transformative. So in that respect, it's not entirely new, but it is really something that is, again, switching significantly. It's not the experience of the problems, it's the experience of the solutions that we're pursuing here. We're using a sequence that is based on the apprenticeship model in didactical research, was that developed. And it's the sequence from familiarizing people with solutions, letting them experience those solutions, and then letting them experiment with the solution so that they can eventually adopt and really own that kind of solution space for themselves. What is also important is that in most of our projects, we really try to combine the student learning with the stakeholder learning. So students and stakeholders are mutual learners and partners in moving forward their understanding of sustainable food economy solutions. I want to give you briefly 3 examples along the sequence. One project we did was we developed a mobile solution theater and a mobile solution studio at Sing Meadows. It was piloted. That is a small farm in urban agricultural site in Tempe, Arizona. And this was really about familiarizing stakeholders and students with sustainable food economy solutions. So we worked with the students over several months to really develop good visual material, information, but also experiential settings for exposing stakeholders, but also learning themselves more about sustainable food economy solutions. That was related to all areas from the production to the recycling of food waste, so the full suite of solutions. We identified more than 20 and really developed specific profiles and made them visually accessible, interactively accessible, so that stakeholders as well as students could really do some deep learning or familiarization with those solutions. Another mode of learning is the experiencing of sustainable food economy solutions. This is an example from one of our collaborating businesses. This is Sinagua Malt and an experiential site visit we did there in 2019. This is in Camp Verde in Arizona. Sinagua Malt is the only new local malting facility for the craft brewing sector, very much dedicated to preserving of water, has supported the crop switching of regional farmers to save water in the Verde River and actually really allow to reach some stabilization in the flows of the local river. And Chip Norton here on the right-hand side is giving us a tour of the facility, and for the students it was such a powerful experience, and some of the professionals from the food economy sector we also invited here. Such a profound experience to see and to witness how that production is actually happening. Really, going deeper into understanding how this food business is run, how it is also linked to other food businesses in the area, and what the practice looks like and feels like. The third one is the experimenting with sustainable food economy solutions, often done after the familiarization and the experiencing. Here is an example of a hybrid cooperative food business development program we did. We recruited 8 female food entrepreneurs who were interested in developing a business plan for a kombucha company with a very strong commitment to sustainability. It was the idea of creating this business from the get-go as a cooperative business, as a worker cooperative with equal participation in decision-making and economic benefits sharing from the entrepreneurs. And it was an 8-week program where the entrepreneurs had really the opportunity to try out what such a business would look like. We went through all of the different components of the business and had various experiences, but primarily really allowing them to experiment the very early stages of a startup of that business. And it has since then been really successful in further advancing their progress to the real startup. So to summarize these learning experiences on solutions, what we see is that we receive consistently positive responses from both students and stakeholders, far more positive responses than in problem-oriented teaching. we really facilitate transformative experiences. I'm receiving after these courses or after those workshops, usually statements like, this was the most transformative experience for me. I all of a sudden see really a pathway for me professionally, where to go in terms of solutions, and feel really empowered. And the inspiration for graduates to apply and also share what they learned. I want to close here my presentation with 3 conclusions. I want to invite and encourage us to catch up with the positive changes that are already happening in the world. The food economy is transitioning towards sustainability, and we should be looking towards those transformations, studying them and sharing them. We can contribute as researchers and academics to those transformations through evidence. There are a lot of opportunities to provide evidence. I gave us a little roadmap here with these typologies of 2 axes that can be used there to structure what kind of evidence can be provided. This basic tool can really help also to support our conversations at the symposium. I went through the proceedings and looked at all the abstracts and started mapping out along those 2 axes where the different contributions are being made on solutions. And I really need to say, I'm really impressed how many solution-oriented research and all the varieties that are coming together at the symposium. So I would hope that we can create stronger connections, also organize maybe our field a little bit better by coordinating research and clearly articulating in what area the research falls, what connection could be made within the cells, what connections could be made across the cells. And so I would hope that maybe that tool could be used for facilitating some of those collaborations across the different solution-oriented endeavors that are coming together at this symposium. Finally, my 3rd conclusion is that the core of what we are trying to do in academia, from my perspective, should still be remaining to inspire and empower change agents of the next generation. I've seen also there really interesting contributions at this symposium about capacity building, about learning and teaching, with a strong interest in the solution side too. And this is where I feel we can and have to make very strong contributions to our societal development. Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to all the conversations coming up over the next several days on how to advance sustainability in food systems and food economies around the world.